Hello and welcome to episode 99 of 101 Part-Time Jobs podcast, the show where I speak to some of our favourite artists and musicians about how they've gone along their way, how they've survived their life in music. And we get a comprehensive guide on this episode to Kip Berman, newly acquainted as The Natvral, whose new record Tethers is out now, produced by Andy Savours, who also did the new Black Country New Road record. And then we also go back in time to Kip's life in Pains of Being Pure at Heart, the much-loved New York band. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you do indeed enjoy it, please go ahead and review it or rate it or send a message to a friend. You can text them saying, hey, I'm listening to this comprehensive guide about Kip Berman. There is nothing else on the internet that is as deep as this episode about Kip Berman, of The Natvral, of the Pains of Being Pure at Heart. And I think that might be true. Not sure. We'll find out. Thank you so much for listening. East London's Signature Brew have been brewing music-inspired beers since 2011. They've made beers with Mastodon, Idols, Slaves, Sports Team, and a whole lot of other bands. You can go onto their website, signaturebrew.co.uk. They've got a load of beers. They've got non-alcoholic options on there as well. If you want to order something directly to your door, you can get 10% off with the voucher code 101podcast, all capitals. All right, here's Kip Berman from The Natvral. Go well. Cheers! Well, Kip, thanks so much for being up for this. You know, I'm a massive fan.
Well, Giles, I know I really appreciate you taking the time to do this because, it's like I'm starting a new chapter of my musical life or identity, and it's just it's very kind that you've wanted to take some time to chat with me today. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I always find it interesting when people start a new chapter in their life because not everyone has been working part-time jobs. You know, some people, do play music full-time. Other people kind of do it half-half. I mean, there's no real specific way to do that is what I've learned over sort of more or less 90 episodes of doing this podcast. But the thing about when someone starts a new project or like, a whole new kind of page is that I wonder if that puts you in a position where you do completely take a restock of the way you see, I guess dirty word, isn't it? But your career or something like that.
Well, yeah, I think that's probably the case for me, at least. My life changed before my music changed. And I think I'm only now catching up, or like the music I'm putting out is only now reflecting that transformation. In 2016, actually in January, I recorded the last Pains album, and then in April, my daughter was born, and every facet of my life transformed a lot when that happened. I moved from New York to Princeton, New Jersey, which is about 45 miles to the south of New York. It's a small university town in the middle of New Jersey. You can walk to the record shop and the coffee shop and things like that. And it's very different than when I was in Brooklyn. And Pains was a band that started when I moved to New York with my friends and started a band, and it basically ended when I moved away. And it was a 10-year period, which was remarkable and far more lucky and fortunate than I could have imagined or could have deserved.
And starting The Natvral, is it coming from the same part of your brain as Pains? Would it be fair to say that?
That's a good question. No, or if it's not the same part of the brain, I just feel the energy, whatever energy animated my songwriting in Pains, just evaporated. It went away. Like the need to create songs that sounded like the Pains of Being Pure at Heart was just stopped. After I made that last record, my daughter was born. I didn't feel any desire to write music that way. And it wasn't like when you say my brain, it wasn't so much an intellectual decision of now my life is different and I must consider different aspects of my situation when I'm writing music. That wasn't it at all. It was more just this inner urge to create. Not the urge to create itself, but the urge to create the way I had been creating, the sort of ideals, the perspectives, the feeling in those songs, I think just went away
There is something so New York sounding about Pains of Being Pure at Heart. You know, it's a bit like chicken or egg for me. I'm not sure which of those ideas came first, but for as someone living in London, you know, there's something so New York about Pains.
It's funny because I guess that's true though. I wonder if our lineage is as much about like the Ramones and Blondie as it is about like Glasgow and like the pastels and orange juice. And I think in a lot of ways, Glaswegian bands were interpreting American music, maybe even more like West Coast American music, and like Teenage Fan Club and things like that. They had a more American, not sound exactly, but they interpreted the sounds of America into something that made sense in their world. And thus sort of we were inspired as much by that as the sounds that inspired them. You know, it's like Teenage Fan Club isn't the Beach Boys, it isn't the West Coast pop art experimental band or whatever, but it's something familiar and recognizable to us from a part of the world that is like across an ocean and has different concerns. It's an interesting thing to be sort of re-influenced by something that was originally from your own country.
And you know, Vaseline's, it makes me think of the Vaseline's. There is a kind of like light-headed sort of spring in your step kind of.
Oh, Vaseline's are great. This band Close Lobsters that's from up there too was great. You know, just like the Pastels, Orange Juice, Joseph K. Like there was just like a bunch of things from that very small dark corner of your island that seemed to just radiate a sort of dirty purity that a lot of indie pop. I mean, I know we get compared and admire like labels like Sarah and some of the stuff from Sweden, like on I forget the name of the label, but you know, there's a lot of indie pop that was very clean, very pristine, and very innocent, like purposefully innocent sounding. And I think that was important music, and it spoke against a sort of prevailing like four guys standing against a brick wall trying to look cool vibe of the era. But I always appreciated that like the bands from Glasgow and Manchester too, like there was something dirtier about them. They sounded like they were not trying to pretend to be children. Like there was something adult, even though sometimes they'd get dismissed as like twee or something like that. I always felt there was some real like just like sex and darkness in their music that was sometimes absent from more other strains of like indie pop music from the 80s and 90s and stuff like that.
I know what you mean. Those bands from, you know, north of England, it seemed like a lot of them were growing up fast, and you know, reading about a lot of those bands, you know, a lot of them were on the dole or they were getting jobs at 16, 17. And I've always, I mean, that's the reason why I do this podcast, is because I find that struggle of work, life, and then also that creative balance is such an interesting way to see things, because it must inform the music and the creative side. So, I mean, looking back, you know, taking it back to the start, you were at college, weren't you, before Pains started? Was that, you know, were you studying something that you really wanted to do in life as a career?
No. When I was at university, I like did just about everything other than study. I mostly was really interested in putting on shows, like booking bands to play in the ping pong room at my university. There was this like room where there was a ping pong table, and you could like, there was a PA in there, so like you could like find bands around that would play for like $75. And it was, like there was this band I loved and I booked them all the time called Dear Nora. And they've kind of taken on this greater history and influence, but they were just like a local band in Portland, and stuff like the band The Thermals. I don't think I booked them when they were the Thermals, but it was like Hutch from The Thermals had this other band called Urban Legends that I booked a bunch there. And he was like, you know, he was like the guy at the coffee shop that you would like say hi to, and all these people were around town, and you would just sort of try to get them to play in the ping pong room. So I was mostly doing that. I liked having a college radio show, just playing records and stuff like that. But I wasn't exactly like, I mean, I wasn't a terrible student, but I wasn't like brilliant or anything. I majored in ancient religion and like studied and stuff, but I was kind of, I mean, I don't know if my grandparents are going to hear this, so I have to be careful, but I wasn't like the best student in the class. I was, you know, there was like someone's Greek homework I was always kind of copying off of, you know, in the corner being like, oh, so that's how you translate that. Or
Well,
Whatever.
imagine living in Portland around that time when there are all those incredible bands around. I mean, that must have been a really exciting time.
It was. I mean, it opened. When I was going to school, like I'd never been to Portland before, and it was like also the only school I got into. Like the one I went to, it was called Reed. So it wasn't necessarily like I had a ton of choices, but I was like, well, Portland. I want to go to Portland. Elliott Smith's out there, and I think that was just kind of. I think he had just kind of moved to LA after I got there, but there was this. It was a completely eye-opening experience of seeing. Like in high school, I saw a lot of punk shows and church basements and VFWs and hardcore shows, but there was this world of DIY music, which was basically the punk shows, but not the punk music. It was like the punk aesthetic, well, not like aesthetic, but the punk political outlook, but not the sound of punk, which it's like not like I'm down on it, but it was much more my speed to have, because I love the community of those like punk shows and stuff and the attitude of it, but I wasn't that into hardcore. Like I kind of like I like the hardcore bands that sounded the least amount like traditional hardcore,
Yeah.
Or there's this one band, Ted Leo used to have this band called Chisel, and they were really involved in that scene, but they sounded like a sort of like a power pop band, and they would like show up and play these like amazing like 2.5 minute like songs, and it would just be like mind blowing. You'd just be like, this is so cool, but what are they doing at the punk show? And like I always kind of like the stuff like that where it was like, why did they let these guys play, but I like them? It's like it was like a little bit more like doing their own thing, but still aligned with like the values of that scene. So I always like that. So in Portland, there'd be like the other part of it is you had to be 21 to go to shows and bars. So there was these house shows and like sort of basement shows and stuff that would be happening with like independent, like what was just like bands, and you could just go and you could see things. And like Mates of State played in my friend's living room once, and like that was cool. It was like mind blowing. And this band from Australia called the Locksmiths, I remember seeing them there, and like a lot of stuff just came through and played house shows because for whatever reason, like obviously like something like Pavement or Guided by Voices would play at a bar, and I couldn't go because I wasn't old enough yet. But there's tons of great stuff I got to discover because of just what I had access to, because of like not being old enough to go to the other stuff.
Before that, growing up, were you looked after by your grandparents? You grew up with your grandparents?
Well, my grandparents, I lived in with them till I was like 9 or 10, but I'd always go back in the summer to see them because, like my grandparents are young. They were 46 when I was born. So my granddad was like my dad, and he'd always take me play baseball and take me to baseball games and play catch after dinner every day. And just like always, I mean, he wasn't like an old man. So he was like my dad, he would just play with me and like make sure I practiced my violin, and was just, always, you take like, if the college basketball team that we liked like made the NCAA tournament, we'd go on a little road trip and go see a game and just like fun stuff like that. And he was just such a huge part of my life, and my grandma too. But my mom was living with them up till I was about 10. And then she moved out to the Philadelphia area, which was about, it's a plane ride, about 2-hour plane ride. And so I grew up in sort of Philadelphia, but I'd go back in the summer to spend the summers with my grandparents.
As a teenager, were you quite sort of galvanized to sort of get up and go? You talk about putting on shows at college. Did you kind of have that attitude as a teenager that you're like, yeah, I'm just going to make this happen myself?
Nah, it took a little while to get there. Like, when I was an actual teenager, like before I went to university, I was pretty, not like shy, but I had me and my friends had like a pop punk band in the basement, and we had like one other friend, and he would just like come watch us play in the basement. That he was like our fan, so we never even even got the gumption to like give our like 4-track tape to like the guys that put on the shows at the VFWs and the whatever. Like, it was almost like, even the DIY scene of like being a teenager seemed like out of reach, like a little bit. Like it was just kind of like, whoa, no, those guys are famous because they're, there's still like a sense of separation. But when I went to university, I think I just made some friends, and maybe I was just like a little older and a little bit more confident, and I learned that I could do that stuff myself, and it wasn't hard. Like if you like talk to a band at a show and you're like, hey man, do you want to play a show at the ping pong room at my college? And they're like, sure. And then you like go to the college like resources committee, and like you get the $75 of funding, and then you buy them like a 12 pack of beer, and they're like super happy, and you're still kind of like scared of them. Like I remember still being like, they're like one or 2 years older. Still, it's such a big difference at that age, and they're like actually playing shows, and that's like a big difference. But that was like a really great time of my life, because I just got to sort of see how that world works, and how you treat people, and just this sense of sort of camaraderie and kindness and mutual support. Like I did like a benefit show. This was like before the Gossip were like a big band in your country, but they were like a big deal where I lived. And it was like a benefit show. There was like a ballot initiative to like basically outlaw like homosexuals from working in schools. It was like, like where I lived, the state I lived in was they had these like ballot initiative things where like if you get enough signatures, there was a sort of direct democracy component, and like the state was pretty divided between like a very rural conservative section and like a progressive sort of leftist section in Portland, but the rest of the state was extremely not that. So there'd be these horrible ballot initiatives that were just like probably not even constitutional, like, but they had to be organized against so that they wouldn't pass. It was like you had to still do the effort of like putting on benefit shows and getting the word out. And so like I put on it was like a benefit show to protest like that ballot initiative, and it was like the Gossip played, and I think Corn from Sweeter Kinney, like I don't know if Corn played, but she was working the ticket booth with me, and like we were like cracking jokes back and forth, and I thought it was like the coolest thing. I was like, this is just like a regular person who's like in this amazing band, it's like Sweeter. There wasn't anything bigger or cooler than Sweeter Kinney at the time, and I was just like, and like the Gossip are playing, and like all these cool people are like doing this, and it was just like, it was so exhilarating to like get a chance to just be part of that world, even if you weren't in a band or doing the music, just being involved in it in some way, and just getting to see these heroes of yours up close and saying hi and all that stuff.
Did that feel kind of 24/7 for you, or was that more of like an evenings vocation?
Well, I think it eventually became like kind of all consuming. Like it was the funniest thing. I was like so obsessed with music, and living in Portland in that time, rent was about $150 a month. So I'd be working at like, and that was like to rent a house with your friends, and you'd have a basement that you could play music in. And I was working at a call center for like $1 above minimum wage. So it was like $8.50 an hour, which like made you seem like you were like a baller. Like people were like, whoa, you're getting $8.50 an hour. And then I was like, or maybe it was like $7.50 instead of $6.50, but it was like at that time, like it was, so I was working at the call center kind of part-time, recharging people's calling cards and prepaid cell phones. And it would be like sort of like weird shifts, like from like 3 a.m. to like 9 a.m. And then you kind of like get out of work at 9 a.m. and like go to the bar and see friends. And it was just like, it was like a very strange sense of what the workday was versus when hanging out was. I don't know. So like I did that for a bit, and was playing in bands in Portland, and I don't know, like everyone said we were like not very good. And in retrospect, we probably weren't very good, but at the time I was like, we're pretty good. We're all right. But then, I kind of, I was like, I got, after a while I moved to New York, and at that point I thought I'd like sort of, that was the end of playing music. I was like, well, time to put that chapter of life away and move to New York. And
what was waiting in New York for you?
What was waiting in New York? Well, not working in a call center at 3 a.m. It's like before I got to New York, I got a job at a newspaper in New Jersey, kind of near where I live now, being like a local reporter, like going to school board meetings and reporting, like ambulance contracts, and just like stuff where it's like the local township is renewing its contract with this ambulance company, but it's just like sort of doing local reporting, like some woman who was like rescuing golden retrievers or something, and it's like just like the one of those newspapers that's like the free newspaper that's not like that's just sort of like the local news. It was kind of sad because I was pretty bad at it, and there was like some really good there was a person I worked with who was like really like, she'd went to like Northwestern journalism school, which was like, like one of the most prestigious like journalism schools in the country. And I was just like also there. And I was like, I can write complete sentences, and I like to, our boss likes to talk to me about classic rock sometimes. So
Great.
I guess I still have a job. And after a bit of that, I was able to get a job in New York at this company. It was called InSound. They sold like, it was like sort of before Amazon was ascendant. It was like a indie rock. Like they sold CDs on the internet of indie bands and vinyl a little bit too when it started off. And so I got sort of hired there. They had sort of like a marketing part of their company too. And like everyone that worked there was all people that, you know, just wanted to be involved in music in some way. And like the guy that sat next to me at work was Alex, who I was really into this band, The Exploding Hearts, and he was playing because they were from Portland. Like they were like the cool band in Portland. I was there, and like he was playing that and the Gories and the Dirt Bombs and a lot of like sort of like Goner Records, like garage rock kind of stuff and power pop, like next to me. And so we hit it off. I was like, whoa, you like them too? And he's like, yeah. And he played me that first My Bloody Valentine EP, the one that doesn't, like the Sunny Sunday Smile one that doesn't, like when people think of My Bloody Valentine, they don't think about that. I was like, wait, this was the same band that did like these other albums? And he's like, yeah. So we were like super into that and like bonded over that at work. And, you know, eventually I invited him over to play music. He'd never played the bass before. I guess he played the guitar a bit. So he played the bass, I played the guitar, and I had like a drum machine, which was just me putting some drum beats on a CD and like a Discman and like pushing play. And so we play along to that. And you know, that's sort of how the band started.
Wow. Where were you getting those drum beats from?
The problem was that they were so bad. I was like playing them myself. So I had a little MIDI controller, and it was like I can't just imagine two fingers going up and down like like, and then sometimes you could I could turn up the speed, I could make it faster or slower, but eventually that got pretty boring after a few songs. And my buddy Kurt, who is my roommate, I didn't have the courage to ask him to be in the band. Like it was Peggy, who was like, you should ask Kurt. Like I'm like, Kurt's too cool, he wouldn't want to do it. She's like, come on, just ask him, he plays drums. And then Kurt was like, yeah, I'll do it. And then he turned me on to this band Close Lobsters too. He was like, the stuff you're doing reminds me of this band Close Lobsters. And they were a Glaswegian like band from the 80s that was like, that went back, and I listened to them. I was like, man, that's awesome. So it was just sort of the people in my life or my apartment that like played instruments, and we got together and we started a band. The reason we got to go on tour was I didn't like steal, like we had lost, I don't know if I stole them, but like, so we had this like backroom at work of like the work I was doing, like it was running like a lot of street teams, like for companies that like, I don't even know how to explain it. It was like street team stuff. And we had all these prepaid calling cards. Once again, like my life like revolves around prepaid calling cards, but we had all these, and for whatever reason, I just sort of, I don't know if like the company really missed them, but I took a bunch and sold them on eBay. And that's how we got the money to go to England the first time and do this, like just sort of this a DIY tour with our friends, the Manhattan Love Suicides. They booked us a bunch of shows, like in Leeds and Stoke, and I think there was one in London, and there was maybe one in Sheffield. And I don't know if we got all the way up to Glasgow that first trip, but there was one in Manchester too. And
Great. That is so funny.
So we like went around with them, and like we couldn't take instruments into the country, obviously, because it was like before, like, you know, we even knew how to get like work permit. You know, we just sort of like bought plane tickets and showed up and borrowed some stuff and played some shows, and that if that hadn't happened, like, you know, that really helped us a lot. We didn't have an album out or anything like that. It was just like that really, it was weird. We like showed up. It was like it felt like we were like the Beatles, the indie pop Beatles. You know, it was like shows were like sold out. We'd been playing to like 8 friends in New York. Like we, you know, what we were used to was just like no one. It's like playing to our friends at like the cake shop or whatever. And then all of a sudden we're in England and we're like on tour, and it was like like that idea of like being on tour. I'd never been in a band that had gotten to even go on tour, and here we were in a different country and like just meeting different people and having a great time and just partying. And like that was when we were up in Leeds and we were talking about the balance between work and like we're in Leeds and like we're hanging out with some bands there. Like our friends, the Manhattan Love Suicides, were there, and I don't know if Darren ever had a job, but like one of the guys there was like a point of pride that they never had a job. Like they just literally like were on the dole and they played music, and it was like that was like that was a cool thing to be, and that was like a way of like resisting like mainstream culture. It was like a way of being subversive, and we were coming from New York where we're just like we have to work like crazy jobs all the time just to like even have like a flat with ants falling out of the ceiling. It's like it was just kind of like this other perspective, but it was cool. Like they were cool kids, and they were making music for this just like the purity of it, just like doing it because that's what they did. And that was a kind of like a different attitude from what we had experienced in the States, where you kind of just there was a necessity to just be able to exist, that you had to that you had to do something that you probably didn't want to do.
When I was a kid, when I used to go to friends' houses and go to their bedrooms, I always used to get home and then change my bedroom. Do you know what I mean? A little bit, because it's like I was inspired by what my friend's bedroom looked like. And I often found that, going on tour, I'd do the same thing. I'd come back from that tour and be like, oh, this is what I'm going to do slightly differently. This is what, you learn about how other people do it, and you naturally get inspired by it. Did that happen to you on that tour?
Well, I think a lot of it was eye-opening for sure. Like this band, the Manhattan Love Suicides, like they weren't like a big deal, I guess, in the UK. I don't know, but we heard them in New York, and we just thought what they were doing was so cool and so inspiring. It was like this idea of like the Jesus and Mary chain, but like they had it was somehow a little bit sweeter and a little. Also kind of had bits of like beat happening. They covered beat happening. It was just like this kind of like, it was like a reminder that the abrasive sound of something like Jesus and Mary Chain had a place in like indie pop. Like it was like that was part of indie pop's history. And like, and indie pop had kind of sanitized itself in a lot of ways to be cutesy and pristine, but there was this part of indie pop that didn't have to be like that. And that gave us a huge sense of possibility with like how we went about things. Like we could be noisy, we could have just like fuzz pedals, and like also like write songs that were like indie pop and like rooted in that community, that didn't have to be like 60s revivalist like mod haircuts and like singing about holding hands and riding bicycles and stuff like that. It was like there's a reason why that stuff was important and cool to do, and I understand it was definitely rooted against like the super cutesy version of indie pop was a way of resisting like the hyper male rockist kind of like real indie music is about. It was like resisting grunge. It was resisting like the hyper seriousness of like some of the stuff that was happening in the 80s. Like it was all great. Like I love a lot of those bands too. I'm like, but I kind of liked, but hearing the Manhattan Love Suicides, and also those early My Bloody Valentine EPs, and of course the Pastels, who were always kind of like ramshackle and raw. And there's this other band called Comet Gain that was kind of happening in the 2000s that was like super, super cool to us. That was also very like blunt and noisy and abrasive. All that stuff like kind of opened our eyes up to allow us to do what we wanted to do. It kind of gave us a license to make the kind of music we wanted to make and still call it indie pop and not feel like it was wrong that we didn't sound like the Field Mice or something like that.
New York City seems to have, it's kind of tough and raw. Was it like that at the time? And was that kind of reflected in your personality or your music?
Yeah. I mean, it's like it's like, I could exist in a tough and raw place forever, but I don't think anyone would confuse me as someone that would like win a lot of fights, like I don't know how to say it. Like I'm just, like if you met me, you'd be like, oh, that guy's not gonna like, but I never want to present myself as like, oh, he's a tough guy from New York. Like he's Lou Reed or whatever. Yeah. I mean, Lou Reed wasn't even Lou Reed, but it's like, there's I don't know. I don't think anyone would like ever like accuse me of like representing like the the tough underbelly of like New York City. Like I'm not Biggie, you know. It's like there's like but
you could be a product of that. I mean, I often think that, you know, there are times where I lived in parts of London that were a bit grimy, and it would make me kind of pushes you in a certain direction.
Yeah, man, it's like I'm definitely like grody and gross or whatever, but like I don't mind that. But it's like so weird. Like I was always surprised I never got like jumped in New York because I had friends who did, and I'd be like walking down the street with like rainbow shoes on or like some like shiny gold jacket. You know, I'd like dress like a complete like, you know, like it wasn't like I was trying to like blend in or whatever. You know, it's kind of like I kind of looked like an easy target probably, but for whatever reason, I don't know. I'm kind of not like big, but I'm like a bigger person, so like maybe people just didn't bother with it. But being up in Leeds, it was pretty. I mean, it was almost like slightly Soviet, you know, where we were was sort of like these rows and rows of houses that were like connected houses that were all built identically in this red brick. And it was just like, and all the streets sort of had the same name, but then had like a different like circle or drive or lane or something at the end. It was very uniform. And, but like, it was fun. You know, it was like, we definitely like partied pretty hard up there, and it was, I don't know how to say it. It was kind of like, it was probably good for us to not ever feel like we were some like Payne's definitely got to do some like fancy big time things, but like we were, I think, at our best when we were kind of playing smaller like places and just having more of a personal connection and going out and having fun, and like that era of the band was really awesome, and I think everyone was really happy, and just having that first time. Like, I mean, I never like. I briefly lived in Germany with my mom when I was a little kid. She was like in grad school over there, and when I was like 5, like I'd never gone outside of the States except to Canada, and I just being abroad for that first time, and just being in a new place and having adventures with your friends, and like we didn't like get kidnapped, but like we got lost. This was before there was GPS, I think, or we didn't have phones or anything. So we needed directions. And these like girls gave us directions, but they were like purposefully like wrong, like maliciously wrong. And it was clear they were like fucking with us, but we didn't know. And it was like all sorts of shit like that, where like you're like in the middle of like some like country road at like 2 a.m. in like the Midlands, and you're just like, you don't have like a phone, you don't have like a map, you're just like, where the hell are we, what are we doing? But it was all good fun, and I think the kind of stuff that so few bands ever get to experience. And now, of course, like, you know, they're just, you know, like young bands coming up. It's like, I just hope there is a world of touring and adventure and a sense of being lost that they can know, because like between technology and then obviously like the virus going around, it's just, I'm not sure if there will be like, you'd read bands, like it wasn't as bad as like you'd like read about like our band could be your life, or Get in the Van, like when Black Flag were first touring, like there was still like a circuit of like indie promoters and stuff that we were like talking to, and we weren't getting stiffed. Like we would, you know, we'd get our $50 at the end of the night, you know, but it was still like a sense of adventure and possibility that I hope is there for the generation of artists that are coming up.
I do feel like it's always going to evolve. You know, I feel like I had my time in my early 20s doing things like that. You're getting lost, you know, and having that excitement, that just pure adventure. Hopefully it's always like an evolving thing, you know, depending on where you live and how old you are.
Yeah, no, it's just like it's just like such a crazy time. Like we were playing in like Nottingham, and like one of the guys, bless his heart, this guy Dom, who does like a nice blog now called For the Rabbits, and he's always been like super supportive. Yeah. But he was like writing about us like we were like the second coming of Nirvana, you know. It was like, I know like British press is kind of hyperbolic, but like we had literally gone from like, we were literally still working like our 9-to-5 jobs, like going back to work the next day, and like no one giving a shit about the fact that we were in a band, or playing at the cake shop to like our 8 friends, and like first of 3, like, you know, and no one giving a shit, or like it was just, and then all of a sudden to have this that sense of that whirlwind of possibility was just like completely bizarre and cool. So I'm just glad that my time on Earth got to experience that a little bit, you know.
Did that change the way, you know, you were kind of organizing yourself? Did that make you kind of a bit more ambitious? Dare I say it?
Yeah, man. Like, well, it's so strange, you know. It's like there was a couple other bands happening in New York that we were like jealous of, and you know, it's a really unhealthy thing to compare yourself to other people. But I think this was pretty healthy. It was more like a positive thing. There was this band called Crystal Stilts who was on Slumberland Records, which ultimately put out our record too. But they had put out their record on Slumberland first, and they were like the coolest, man. Like they were like the Velvet Underground. Like if imagine like going into the coolest party in New York City, they would be like the band playing. It was just this really cool psyche sound that I can't even describe. The singer was this tall dude that looked like a really tall Bob Dylan, you know, like the guitarist looked like he was John Cale, a young John Cale, you know, they were just Frankie Rose was the drummer then, and she played drums standing up, and she went on to, you know, be in Vivian Girls and do her own music, and she was in Dum Dum Girls for a bit. Like cool. She was like a sort of iconic figure in the New York music scene then and still. And they were just like the coolest band. And like when they put their record out, they got to go on tour, like a Rio tour, and like go to Italy and like, and just like they'd come back and you like hear stories about it. And that was super inspiring. And then there was this other band called Pansiao who were from Boston, and they were just like indie pop band, like, and they got to play a Swedish festival. Like they had gone and played this festival called Emma Boda in Sweden. And they'd come back and just like the idea of knowing people that had gone to Sweden to play music, or like gone on tour to Europe and like played in like these cool clubs in Northern Italy and had all these stories. And that was really inspiring to us. And it made us want to do that too. You know, it was, we didn't want to sound like them or it wasn't so much like that. It was just like having those experiences. Like we wanted to feel that those same things and get to do that too. And I mean, I don't know, like, you know, it's not like a bad thing to say you're like ambitious. Like there's like goes back and forth where bands are supposed to say they're terrible or bands are supposed to talk about themselves like they're great. But like for me, like I was so inspired by seeing those bands get to go do real things and be on tour and exist as like actual bands, that it was just incredibly inspiring to me and made me want to do that with our band too. And
was there a narrative or a vibe about, you know, those kinds of bands? I mean, was there a scene where, you know, would you say it was a scene? Or was
sure.
it...
I mean, we shared a practice space with Crystal Stilts, and it was like they were. I mean, I don't know if they were like our buddies. Like we play shows together, but they all seemed a little too cool. Or like maybe like not like they weren't like too cool. They were nice. They were nice people. But I was always a little afraid to like, you know, be like, hey guys, what's up, man? Hey, you want to get some beers, man? Hey, like they were actually like cool people, you know. And the guy that plays in the Natvral, the keyboards on this album, Kyle Forrester, he was in Crystal Stilts. He played with them. So amazing. So they had that cool organ sound, and like I'm like, Kyle, and he's like goofy like me. He's like very loquacious as well. So he is an easy guy to talk to. So if I would ever hang out with him, I'd be talking to Kyle mostly because he was like, hey Kip, what's up, man? How's it going? So was there a scene? There was Vivian Girls, but I feel like that scene got defined externally, and we became friends with some of those people because of how almost like a false sense of a scene from abroad. Like in the UK, they were like obsessed with the Vivian Girls first. And like we played some shows with them over there, and people were just like chanting Brooklyn. It was like everyone was dressed like they were living in Brooklyn and like chanting the word Brooklyn at the stage. My hat goes off to you. Like the UK really still gets excited about music in ways that are like really touching. Like the fact that there's a bunch of people dressed like they were living in Bushwick in 2006 and screaming Brooklyn, Brooklyn at the stage while the Vivian Girls played. Like they were really fucking cool too, but we weren't like back home. We didn't like hang out with them, but we would be around them when we were like abroad or like playing shows together. And there was this little tour we did where I don't know how to say it. Like it was right after the Primavera Fest in Spain, which was 2009. And that was sort of like, they were really blowing up and things were starting to happen for us a bit. And we went on this tour together in Europe, just a few shows. And I don't know, like we thought they were the coolest band in the world and like super punk rock, and they didn't give a fuck about anything, and didn't care what people thought, and they just had this mystique about them. But then just being able to like get drunk with them and talk with them, like they were like that way towards us. Like, I don't know how to say it. They're like, no, we think you guys are like the Strokes. You guys are like, so we're like no, we're not. We're like fucking nerds that like, I don't know, like care about like stupid records that no one liked the first time around. It's like I don't know how to say it in a nice way, but like we were both able to talk about our insecurities to each other, like the things we were worried about. And like, I just got a totally different sense of them as people. And it made me admire them all the more. I thought of that era, like there were certain bands that were just special and always will remain special. And I really think Vivian Girls were a special band. And I think Crystal Stilts were too. And I think drums as well. Like drums were sort of like, not like frenemies, but they were sort of like another band that was sort of like in our world that was like both similar and different. And I think they were awesome too. And Connor from the drums played in Pains for a little while. He dated Peggy, still does. And we played shows with them, and they were so good as a live band, and they had such a distinct perspective on their records where it just sounded like, it didn't sound like other records. And it had this, a lot is made out of like lo-fi or hi-fi or mid-fi or whatever, but like they just had the sound of their music had a really distinct point of view. And I think it made it really special. And maybe I didn't even like when they first started out, I didn't totally appreciate it, but as time goes on, it makes me think they were like really cool more and more. Like, and there's still songs of theirs I go back to, and same with Vivian Girls, same with Crystal Stilts. All those bands were like really exemplary of a certain time of New York music. And I'm just happy Pains got to be a part of that too. Well, not fired. I got laid off. There was a big financial crash in 2008. I lost my job. Probably deservedly, because like most of the things I was doing at work was just to like designing 7-inch sleeves or whatever. I was like definitely not. I was like using my time at the office not to do the things I was supposed to be doing. So everyone was nice about it, but they were like, "Hey, the economy is tanking. You got to go." But it was like such I was bummed out at the time because I was like, what am I going to do? But it's weird. Like I lost my job, I think in December of 2008. And then the Pains record came out. Actually, no, we went on tour with The Wedding Present in 2008, and I came back, and then I lost my job. But there was like, I could get a little unemployment for like a month or two. And then Pains record came out, and all of a sudden it was like, there's all this opportunity to, tour like in a full-time way, like a full-on tour. Like the record was well received, and there's all these things happening. So it was like I lost my job, which was like a bummer, but then I got the chance to not like work, but I got a chance to do the band like full on, like all the time. And I not only got a chance to do that all the time, but I also got a chance to like write music. So like I wrote the Pains second record, Belong, really kind of in that time, even before the first one kind of came out.
So that the first one came out in February. So you lost the job in December.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd written some stuff in like sort of before that too. But I remember distinctly being like, maybe we shouldn't release this record. We should release the next record instead. I was like really excited about the songs I was writing on Belong, and you get to sometimes the point where you've like lived with certain songs for a long time. So like the songs on the first record, I was like, maybe these aren't good enough. Maybe we should just scrap it and try a new record. But, I didn't do that. I'm glad.
That's interesting because Belong came out in 2011, and 2 years is quite a long time.
Well, but we recorded it in the summer of 2010. So from 2009 to basically the summer of 2010, like Pains just toured like a lot, like in the United States, in Europe, in Japan. We even got to go to Australia for that album, and it was just like a fairly full-on year. And by 2010, we had shows that summer too, more at festivals, and then we recorded the record in the summer of 2010. And I guess for whatever reason, it didn't get released till the spring of 2011. So, I mean, I was doing music like pretty much nonstop from when the first Pains record came out. And then when Belong came out, we were doing it nonstop too until about 2011. We toured a bunch. 2012 too, and then we recorded. And then there was like some, like issues. And then like the third album, there was some lineup changes and stuff like that. But those first two records were almost a nonstop like whirlwind of just, there was like I remember like seeing our press kit, and I guess I'd made at some point someone was like, "Can you approve this?" And I was like, I had said at some point like, "Days off are no fun." It's like I was just like really into just doing as much as possible as quickly as possible, and without any sense of like, let's take a day off, like right. Or whatever. And maybe that was like deleterious to like the mental well-being of the group, and maybe it wasn't the right decision. But I had this. It was like I'm an annoying person to be in a band with, or at least I think I was then, because I had a sense of how unlikely all the things that were happening were, and I wanted to like never. I didn't want them to stop. It's like I'd been in bands for like a long time in my life that literally played to like the 6 people that you're friends with in the basement of someone's house, and then to have all this stuff happen with Pains, I was just really maybe annoying, like just like really insistent that we appreciate it. Like I was like someone's like granddad, like we have to appreciate these opportunities. It didn't happen for the bands we're ripping off. It's like the the Pastels, or like all these, like the Wake or whatever, like another Glaswegian band, the Wake, like all these really cool artists never got to go on like a full on tour, like, or they put out a record and they maybe play a couple shows like in England or Scotland or whatever, or maybe go over to like a couple shows in like France. But like the things that were happening for us were just on this other level and so unlikely. And I felt like not like guilty, but I also didn't feel like we deserved them, because I was just like, well, the things we admire never got to do this, so why are we getting these opportunities when like so many artists that inspired us to make the sound didn't get to do it?
Right.
And I just didn't feel like we were like good enough to be worthy of that, because like the things that I held in like the highest esteem didn't get to experience that. So I think I was a little bit in that way like annoying to be around, because I felt like it was kind of a house of cards, and that we had to sort of just do everything we could as fast as possible before someone discovered that we were frauds.
Well, I know. I mean, I would do exactly the same thing, and in my own way, I have in the band that I was in, just did everything because I just couldn't stop. And speaking about talking of 101 part-time jobs, I mean, he talks about approving a press release. I mean, those things are kind of part-time jobs, right? I mean, these are all things that did you hit the ground running with that? Were you able to take it seriously as well as being enthusiastic?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Jewish kid with nice grandparents. Like I wasn't like giving the middle finger to like people that I met for the most part. Like I wasn't in the Jesus and Mary chain. It's like my general outlook is like, I don't know how to say it. It's like my grandma has Google alerts, so like anything I said would like get back to her. So I didn't. I mean, I don't know how to say this like in like the best way, but it was like there was a time when like we got offered a show in Israel and we turned it down. But I tried not to like make a big deal about it. Like we just canceled it and we're like, we don't want to play here, because like a lot of people from like Israel wrote to us and like explained to us like the situation and how like playing a show there like normalizes a sort of status quo that is like deeply unjust. So we wanted to do that, but I didn't want to like. We wanted to like not play and like support the like a peaceful boycott to bring about like a more just living situation for the Palestinian people there. But like but like from an older generation, like my grandma like saw it as like being opposed to like the policies of the Israeli government was in some way anti-Semitic, but it's like it isn't. But it's also hard to explain that to a different generation who grew up like with a different frame. Like she lived through World War II. Like she remembers talking to her mom, like saying, "Can't I just talk to Hitler and ask him that we're nice people?" Like she had memories like this of like actual. So to her, it was like hard for her to understand that the reason we were deciding not to play in this place was rooted in actually good things. Like it wasn't about
absolutely like
being mean to people. It was about like trying to help people like have the same quality of life and the same opportunities and the same human dignity. But so it was like one of those things where it's like I always felt like I had to kind of be, I couldn't. And maybe for a good way, it's like there's nothing worse than like super self-righteous bands talking about what great people they are and like what great causes they support and all that stuff too. Like you don't want to always like toot your own horn in that way. But like there was always a sense of, however, whatever I said and whatever I did would get back to my grandparents at some point. And like I love my grandparents. I don't want them to think I'm like a terrible grandson. So I kind of had to find a way of expressing myself without, I know this sounds so silly, but it's like some bands I'd see were like very open with like tales of like drug use and like all sorts of stuff. I'm always like, I tried to keep it very sanitized, like what I was able to share with the world. And so I mean I don't even know what the point of that was. I'm just saying, like, when your grandma has Google alerts, you can't tell people to fuck off all the time, like, because like you'll get like a phone call from your grandma where it's like, I saw you. Even we had a song called "This Love Is Fucking Right," and even that was like she eventually acquiesced to that one. I was like, Grandma, it's funny. It's like it's a sweet song. It's not like fuck love. I wouldn't even say it to her, but I was like, Grandma, it's funny. It's supposed to be funny. And like she
did you kind of have to give a full explanation?
I had to give a full explanation, a little bit of that. But she's really support. I mean, she has like, I have to find a way. This new record isn't on CD, but I need to find a way to get a CD to her, like make a CD so that she can play it. But she's like incredibly supportive. She'd always like play like Pain CDs in her car when she was driving around, and she's 87 now. And she's exceptionally supportive and excited about me playing music. And in fact, like when she came to see me, she always complained it was too loud. Like she'd come and see a show, like even in her 80s, like she'd come to a Pain show, and like we try to find like places for them to sit, because like a crowded bar or whatever isn't always great for grandparents. But she would come and she told me, she's like, I would just love to see you just play your own songs on stage. This is great, but just play them, just sing them so I can hear the words, and play them just so you and your guitar and sing them. And in a strange way, that's kind of what is happening now for me. Like I will tour with a band if that's possible, but there's also a version of this new music that I think makes sense and is just as powerful and just as meaningful if I just play it by myself on stage, just me and the guitar, without any of the trappings and the structures of what a band is supposed to be, just like literally just a guitar and a microphone. And that's enough for these songs. And in a lot of ways, like I mean, it's not the only reason, but like I think my grandma's telling me that, like at least kind of made me stop and think about my own music and like what was really necessary and what was really at the core of what I was doing. So yeah.
When you shared that first single, I thought, oh well, it sounds like it's written on acoustic guitar, definitely, but it just feels so righteous.
That one did feel pretty righteous. The first time I played, I'll admit, I was like down in the basement. I was like, whoa, this sounds cool. I'm just going to do this like part a few times and just like sing it. And,
and we're talking about Why Don't You Come Out
Why
Anymore?
Don't You Come Out Anymore? That's right. People are listening. It's so funny. I think we're just chatting. And then I remember that like people are actually going to hear what I'm saying.
That's my job.
About, no, it's a really good thing. Like with the Natvral, I did kind of want to do it not on acoustic. I'm not saying like, I know what you mean by acoustic guitar, like playing a guitar and singing, but I wanted to keep it electric because I thought there's nothing more boring than seeing a middle-aged man on stage with an acoustic guitar and a plaid shirt, like singing earnest songs about like the changes in his life, and now I'm a dad and I'm gonna write Butterfly. It's like there's like so many kind of like tropes that you can fall into pretty quickly if you're just like that guy. But so I wanted to keep it with an electric guitar. Also because Billy Bragg is cool, and he, it's like you watch those concerts, and I mean, I don't know how he's perceived in the UK. Like I asked a friend, and people were like, not super. I don't know. He was like kind of seen as like an oddity or sort of like a here. Like he is like, at least among like me and like my wife and her best friend in high school, and like the one cool punk kid. I remember like the one cool punk kid in my high school was like really into that too. And like the idea of just like an electric guitar and a voice and like that is like a powerful thing. And
his tone of guitar, that is, similar to Why Don't You Come Out Anymore. It's like a hollow body sound guitar. I know you don't necessarily play a hollow body.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to contradict you when you say nice things. I'm just like, it's like I actually wrote it on an electric guitar, but it's like I don't mean to be a stickler about any of that.
No, but it's that Billy Bragg sound though.
I was, the fun. It's Billy Bragg. I mean, it's also like I guess as I think when my daughter was born, I was spending a lot of time at home, and like the kind of music I was listening to was different. And it was actually my mom. I was like writing some music, and she was like, "This reminds me kind of Richard Thompson." And I was like, "Who?" And she's like, "Dude." Well, she didn't say dude, but she said, "I think you would really like his music, and you should listen to some." And so I started listening to some Richard Thompson records, and I was just blown away, like just absolutely blown away. And then I went back and listened to Fairport Convention, which I don't know what it is like that. Maybe it's because the band was called Fairport Convention, and it sounds like a real hippy dippy flower power kind of thing. And I knew they were kind of, the word folk was associated with them. I didn't understand what their music actually sounded like. And I was so wrong. Like I was astonished when I listened to those Fairport Convention records, how inventive and playful and cool and like just
that's funny.
beautiful.
My parents love Fairport Convention, and I don't think, I'm not sure about my brother or sister, but I've never listened to them, and they're one of like the 3 or 4 bands that my parents have always talked about.
Okay, so Fairport Convention, Richard Thompson, like that stuff meant a lot to me. And that was sort of my mom telling me that like the stuff I was writing reminded her of that, which is like really cool. And then Dylan as well, like especially like the live Dylan records, like that one that's like says it's from the Royal Albert Music Hall, but it's really from Manchester. Like I listened to that a lot. And when I was younger, I just didn't approach Dylan because he has like the worst fan club. I think that's what it is. It's like he is insulated from, like the truth is insulated by a bunch of old guys with beards telling you like treating him like a god. Like it's like it's if you listen to the people talk about Dylan, you will get annoyed by Dylan. But if you like actually go back and listen to records, you'll just be like, this guy was funny and he was having a good time and he was clever. And it was like, it wasn't as serious as his sort of biographers. I mean, I'm sure like it is serious. Like I'm not saying he doesn't take himself seriously too, but like those records are playful and there's like just a joy of language and all of these things that I never really heard the right way before. And I took it too seriously, or I just didn't want to like engage with it because I thought you had to be like this expert to even approach the great man and his sacred texts and all this bullshit. And I'm just like, but you like listen to it and it's like, I'm a poet. I know it. I hope I don't blow it. And it's like, that shit is funny. And it's like, and so you like go back and like go listen to and you just, there's this like, this sense of liberation of language where you can actually just say whatever the fuck you want and you can say it however you want to say it, and you can make sounds, you can enjoy the sound of words, and you can just express yourself in certain ways. And I found that so comforting. And I always felt like with Pains, the kind of stuff I wanted to write or was trying to write just was too, it didn't fit the music quite right. Or especially with the third and fourth albums, I was trying to express some different kinds of things, and people between not wanting to hear it or like, it just didn't, people wanted nostalgic songs about teenage feelings, and I just didn't have those anymore. That wasn't what I was about. And I was trying to express kind of not like Stranger Things, but maybe things with a little more nuance about my life and stuff that, and it just didn't fit the, I don't want to say genre, but it just seemed there was something about the form of the music that didn't allow for the ambiguities or the different patterns of words. Everything was structured in this sort of verse chorus on a metronome drum beat kind of thing. And what I was trying to do with this record was just, or what I did was just the opposite of that. We didn't have like a metronome in the studio, like we didn't track the drums and then the bass and the guitar. We did it all together. And we did some of the vocals even live, like too, just to kind of embrace the not imperfections, but the human moment of creation, and like just get the song out as the song and not worry about the perfect version of the song. And I think and I think Pains was always striving to be something better than it was, which I think is a cool thing. Like when you're like trying to make you're trying to do something that you can't do, but like you do something else as a result. Like I think that kind of like aiming for something you can't do, like you're gonna come up. It's sort of like I always call it like heroic amateurism, like sort of like this idea of trying to do like the big thing, but you don't really know how the big thing was done right, or like so you're kind of doing it in your own way. And I think that was like a cool vibe, and maybe that's what kind of distinguished Pains from some of the bands that were more like, we just want to make like lo-fi noise rock or something. Like we were always trying to be like a little bit like better than we really were. I don't know. Right. Sort of kind of going for an ideal that we couldn't achieve, like something the striving for it. It was cool. But I'm
reading a great book right now by Damon from Galaxy 500 called Ways of Hearing. In fact, it's a transcript from the podcast he did.
Damon. Oh yeah, dude. We did a Galaxy 500. And I don't mean to interrupt your story. Like, go on with it, but I did.
No, not at all.
There was this series of like Galaxy 500 covers that people were doing this summer, and I did one. And there was like a website where they were all hosted, and there was like something where it was like I sent like the wrong version of the video, and so I had to write to the guy at the website and be like, "Hey man, I sent this version in, but it was like the messed up. So please use this one instead. I'm sorry." And the guy wrote back, and it was like Damon from Galaxy 500 was the person that was like manning the website. I was like, It's you. What's up? And one of my mom's best friends, she was an English professor, and like one of her colleagues, this guy Michael Berthold, who was taught with her and used to be a high school English teacher, was Damon's high school English teacher, and he was like, Mr. Berthold was like the best. He's encouraged me, and like all these. It was like this, like we had this like total bond over his high school English teacher, who I also knew somehow through my mom, and it was this. So I was go on and tell me about Ways of Hearing.
That's it. I'm just saying what you said about not having a metronome, because the first chapter, spoiler alert, basically made me think, fuck, why did I use a click track? Why did I use a metronome on so many things that I've done? You know, I wish I hadn't, because it takes away from that moment. And, you know, I guess it's pretty easy to cross the line into some kind of hippy dippy stuff when talking about this. But, you know, this conversation we're having now, the kind of outside sounds you hear on the street where everyone listening to this is hearing behind this, you know, these are all things that are like a real life. I feel like, or at least this first chapter very quickly convinced me that when you've got a metronome or a click track, it kind of somewhat takes away, or at least compromises, the real life element of it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I owe a huge debt of gratitude to my buddy Andy Savours, who he produced the last two Pains records, but he also gave me, he's the one that was like, with this new project, he really gave me the courage to do it the way we did it. And I remember like the first EP I did, it was just like guitar and voice with him. And it was like after a Pains tour, and he's like, I was like, I got some new songs. He's like, well, come by the studio tomorrow. But like, you know, my flight was the next day, so I had a free day. And we'll track them together or something. And I'm like, well, don't we need to like get someone to play drums on it maybe? Or like we should do like have to like get the right guitar tone? Or he's like, no. I showed up, there was literally like a guitar, an amp, and a microphone. And he's like, just play and sing at the same time. And I was like, well, don't we need to like isolate the vocal? You know, there's all these things I had been so used to being told. Not like it wasn't my preferred way of working. I just didn't know any better. Just like when you go into studios, like people tell you the right way to do things. Like and I got to work with some amazing people, and like they made way cooler records than mine, but they had like a very specific way of like how a band is recorded, where you like record the drums and you record the bass, and then you add the guitars, then you do the vocals, and then you like redo the vocals and add and all that stuff. And like it was the complete opposite of that experience working with Andy. And he actually He actually just did that Black Country New Road record too.
Oh,
so
amazing.
it's the year of it's the year of the Andy. So it's like, yeah. So it's like he's like, I'm glad he's finally getting some recognition, because he was just really, because he's my friend. Like, I just trusted him implicitly, and he was just like, just play your songs, sing them. That's all you need to do.
Yeah.
And that was all we needed to do. And then for this record, he was the one that was just like, we're going to do the drums and the bass and the guitar and maybe even the vocals at the same time. And let's just see how it goes. And a lot of that work, the way we did it, was because I had no time. Like, I didn't have like a week to book into the studio. You know, I was like, my mother-in-law is in town this weekend and she can help look after the kids while I go up to New York, and we have like one day in the studio where we can play the drums. So like, let's try to do as much as we can and as fast as we can. So it was like a lot of it wasn't like this like Ouija, I don't know how to say it. It wasn't like this grand design of how to do things either. Like, sometimes it's just like the necessity of like the moment. You just try to make the record as best you can with like the time you got and the people around you. So I'm really grateful to Andy so much for just kind of having that insight that the things that made my songs weren't necessarily, like, I wasn't trying to be like in the Pains, it was always like, oh, we got to be as good as the Killers, you know, or something like that, where it was like, I know it sounds silly, but there was always this ideal of something that was like the proper way of doing things. Like,
Yeah.
And for this, there was none of that, which was really liberating and cool.
Has the Natural kind of become, you know, obviously it's what you do now. I mean, has it kind of become another, you know, I hesitate to use the word job just for the sake of, you know, this podcast, but, you know, has it become your full-time thing now again? I mean, obviously, you know, full-time is completely subjective and it is what you make it to be, but do you know what I mean? Does it feel like, you know, something you wake up and you have a plan for and you go to bed with something in mind about it?
Most of my days are consumed by waking up and making sure that like my daughter finds the pair of socks that feel good on her feet. You know, there's like, we try one pair of socks and she liked yesterday, and then today they don't feel good, so we try another pair of socks, and a lot of that. And then making some toast and making sure that like my son puts on a pair of boots that are somewhat his size, not just the pair that his sister has because he likes them better. No, my daughter's almost 5 and my son's a little over 2, and given that we've had like this really crazy year of the pandemic, most of my thoughts and energies have been on just getting through each day and making sure that with them, and my partner works full time too. So obviously she is extremely overburdened at the moment as well. So I'm not like sitting around gazing at my like navel and considering the implications of my art and the 21st century.
I mean, it's doing everything from interviews like this to checking artwork to, you know, doing the stuff we talked about before that you would, you know, you were doing in Pains.
You know, the reason I do music is so, I mean, the goal is to not actually have to work. You know, like the goal, not like actually work. It's like the music shouldn't feel like work is what I'm saying. It's like when bands talk about like, I treat this as a career and I treat this as a job and I take it seriously and I work 8 hours a day on it. It's like, you know, I'm not saying everyone should be a goof off, but I do believe that a degree of goof off energy is necessary in the world of in this world, because I think music, or if you want to call it art, you can call it art. It doesn't benefit. Like, the reason you do it isn't like at 9 to 5 I work on writing songs or whatever. It's just like that kills the spirit of it in some ways. I really believe that there should be some. I mean, don't get me wrong. I try to do it the best I can and I take it seriously, but I don't treat it like a job, because if it was just a job, then there's better ways to make money. You know, there's like, I don't know. And I feel there's this like strange expectation that a lot of people have where it's like, if they work hard at something, they deserve to succeed. And that's true in most fields of life, I think. But I think with this, it has nothing to do with like punching a time clock. It's like, you kind of just have to have fun with it and do it for the reasons that you like doing it and hope for the best, I guess, but not like have this expectation that you deserve success because you've worked hard. And I don't know how to say that. I don't disrespect hard work, but I don't think hard work is the thing that animates good songs.
But you can have discipline and not have expectations.
Yeah, man, I'm not arguing for being a fuck up. I'm arguing for like just letting the muses do their thing and not get in the way and have fun and
totally, yeah,
and not because if you treat music like your job, it's going to sound like a job to listen to it. It's like that's at its core, man. It's like you have to have some levity, some playfulness, some spontaneity, some freedom in your expression, or else it just gets bogged down by seriousness. And some serious stuff is good, but I think that's what's so cool about the Black Country New Road album is it's like there's nothing that sounds on paper like it should be more self-serious and self-important than like 9 people with an oboe making post-rock. But then you like listen to it and it's funny and it's witty and it's honest and it's like self-effacing and it has all these.
It's vulnerable.
It's vulnerable, exactly, and that's the thing about it. Like my fear, it's like it's the Nirvana thing. Like there's probably going to be like 27 bands that start up that try to sound like that just get it wrong. You know, they forget that there's joy in it and there's like humor and grossness and all that stuff. Like, and like with Nirvana, like people forget that like those songs sound so ebullient and like boisterous. Like they're not like they're heavy and they deal with heavy things and they're loud but they're not a drag to listen to. You know, they're full of energy and life and vitality. And I think with that Black Country New Road record, that this shone through against all odds that record is, and that's what I'm sure that's what makes it special. And I see like people are. I'm not the first person that's like that's a cool record. You know, it's like it seems like people are getting it, and that's like so that's great, and I'm really happy for it. So it's
amazing sounding. It's amazing sounding. Kip, thank you so much. This has been such a great chat. I mean, like, you know, it's speaking for an hour and a half. I've had a great time hearing your story.
Giles, like honestly, this is like the first chance I've spoken to an adult about music in like maybe over a year. So like, it was just as exciting for me to get to speak to you. And I forgot. I know I forgot most of the time, but there are people listening to this. So thank you for letting me share my thoughts on whatever it is I shared my thoughts on with you today. But thank you for the kind words about Pains and for this new record. It's heartening to know that there's people out there that I don't know how to say it. It's like I've kind of been in Princeton, New Jersey, doing things that aren't music for the last 5 years for the most part, and it's fun for me to think like someone actually like remembers Pains fondly and is excited to hear what I'm up to next, you know? So thank you.
For me, Pains like held that period of time for, I think I discovered it when I was 18 or 19 in 2009 or 10 or 11. And I don't know, for me and my friends, you know, it was like the first and last thing we put on a night, you know what I mean? So it's got such a wonderful place in my heart. And as I told you on Twitter, you know, why don't you come out anymore? I've been waking up and listening to that tune. You know, I love it. I love it.
Thank you so much, Giles. I really appreciate, I mean, you can't see it on the radio or the podcast, but I'm probably blushing somewhere in central New Jersey right now. So thank you so much for your time.
Brilliant. Just to end with, you know, how does one go about, you know, I mean, bands are obviously releasing records and some of the best records in, you know, guitar music have come out in the last few months. I'm thinking about, you know, Black Country New Road, Shame, TV Priest, who are great if you haven't heard them. I mean, these are all bands that would obviously, you know, the thing to do is go on tour when you release a record. What's the kind of standing right now with the Natvral and the kind of organizational side of that? How is that working for you?
You know, I look forward if there is like even going on tour is like presupposes anyone's going to like listen to the record and care. But if people do check it out and there is the opportunity, of course, I really look forward to the chance to travel and play music. There's like nothing more fun in this world than doing that. And in the meantime, I think it's kind of a blessing that people will get to hear the record and experience it and live with it for a while before, I get to go out and play. It's like, it's a new thing. And it's not the worst thing in the world that if like, you know, next fall, if maybe things are better, I can come and play some shows and do things like that. But, you know, in the meantime, they can just live with the record and listen to it. I'm not too keen on the whole like live streaming. I think the last thing people want to do is like look at their computers or phones even more, watching bands play in their basement. Like I'll do a little of that. I'm going to try to record a couple things and try to do it a little more interesting than just me jamming in my basement. But
yeah,
for the most part, I'd rather just, wait to do it the right way. Even if it means like, people, it might take a little time, but I think there will be a future to look forward to. I hope.
I think what you said there about being able to sit with a record and there, and wait to see it live, I think that could actually be a really powerful thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think about that with what Pains happened at first. Like we had this chance to go, like we were playing shows and we put our music on MySpace, I can remember that. And it was like free. And like we played shows and people knew our songs, even though we hadn't really even released anything. It was like this amazing thing, like whatever 4 songs were on MySpace, which is basically all the songs we had anyway. We'd go and play them and people were like singing them back to us and we hadn't released anything properly. And it's just a powerful thing how in different parts of the world, your music can be heard so much more. I mean, there are a lot of downsides to the way technology has affected how people listen to music and all that. But I think there's a lot of positives too, where there is no barrier for being able to just hear something new and try it out for yourself and not rely on like, I have to buy this magazine and read this record review. And if this like one guy thinks it's good or bad, or one girl thinks it's good or bad, that affects whether I'm going to go listen to it. People can just try things and people can experience things for themselves. And I think that's a cool democratic impulse to music. And I certainly, from the start, I've always been more concerned about just letting people hear it than like however the business side of it works. It's like the most important thing is if you make a song, you hope people can hear it without too much trouble. And technology at least has allowed for that.
Amazing. Kip, I think that's a perfect note to end on.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Giles.
What a polite human. I hope none of you are too sick by us saying thanks to each other all the time. But thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed already, please do that. I think I'll be back next week, although there is something that I'm working on that I'm going to announce very soon that I'm really excited about. I've been working on it for a couple of months now, already messed it up a couple of times and trying to fix it now. But in the next couple of weeks, I should have something very special to announce that you'll be able to have in your hands about 101 part-time jobs. That's the plan anyway. I've said too much. Here's Cocksparrow.
I've been working all day for me mate on the side, running around like a blue-ass fly. I've been working all day for me mate. Every bleak minute I've been on the go, up and down the ladder like a fiddler's elbow. I've been working all day for me mate.
This is a Mighty Moon Media podcast.